saying this because I love the John Wick franchise so much. John Wick Chapter 3, we were all like, let's start a stunt category at the Oscars because John Wick needs to be recognized. I mean, that was art. So I was really excited for John Wick Chapter 4, but after having seen it, I'm actually tempted to give this movie a Rotten Tomato. I know! It seems inconceivable, but yet here I am. What's stopping me? Well, as you might have realized, I don't like to give out Rotten Tomatoes. It's really aggressive to hit a movie with a Rotten Tomato because, people worked on it, they tried, especially when you respect the people who are associated with the movie and you do care about the franchise. I wish there was a squishy tomato, that you could still eat a tomato. You could eat parts of this tomato, although part of it I don't think that you can. And one of the reasons I'm considering the Rotten Tomato is that I think the choices were made here that I feel were not good. And I think that the franchise really needs a wake-up call on the quality or the lack of quality of the script. The script's real bad. The script's embarrassingly bad. The script is, how did you decide to film if this was your script bad? But also, so then why am I hesitating about why not just give it a Rotten Tomato? Well, the Paris sequences, which take up about an hour towards the end of the movie, are so incredible. The Paris sequences, there's 3 of them, maybe 3.5. So good that it's like, you gotta see this movie just for that alone. That is what I was hoping for. I was hoping for a whole movie of the Paris sequences. The Paris sequences do build on Chapter 3 and are even better. So it's hard to hit that with a Rotten Tomato because you're like, but that stuff's so amazing. Like, wow. There's like such cool elements in the sequences that I don't want to spoil for you. I hope that you get surprised by them. But they were just so incredible. So incredible. This movie's going to have massive spoilers. So you might want to go and mute John Wick and John Wick Chapter 4 and Keanu Reeves and stuff like that and Chad Stahelski, just anything associated with the movie before it comes out. Or maybe even right now because critics have seen it and people are going to be talking about this movie. And I think not for good reasons. Now, another problem I had with this film is that my press screening for some reason was really poorly done. They were very nice. They gave us free snacks. They were very kind, but they booked the press screening in like the worst, crummiest, unupgraded theater. It was like the antithesis of a premium screen. It was crappy seats, a small screen, not surround sound. So I did not feel immersed in the movie. I'm going to see John Wick Chapter 4 again. I'm going to see it again for those Paris sequences. And also I want to see if the premium theater makes a difference because it was like going to see the Mona Lisa but having to stand in the back and they don't even give you binoculars. They're like, there it is, through all those people at the other end of the room. And you're like, what? So going into this movie, I was so excited because, again, I love John Wick Chapter 3 in particular. And amongst my friends, I was calling it Museum of Modern Art Fight Club. And it was getting me even more excited for the movie because I was like, isn't that hilarious? What a funny thing. And that perfectly encapsulates the John Wick franchise, or at least I thought it did. Because when I watched this latest chapter, it really came across more like Museum of Modern Art stunt show. And what the difference is that in a stunt show, there's really no emotion or story. They're just going through the motions, giving you a demonstration of fighting. And that's what this felt like a lot of the times. I mean, sure, it was cool fighting skills and amazing settings with amazing music, and there is entertainment in that. But it's like when you watch a stunt show, and a 3-hour stunt show, that's a tall order. So, but it's just not as good as John Wick Chapter 3, and I had hoped for an entire movie that built on that last film and was even better. And instead, I feel there was serious backsliding. Again, no spoilers, but also one thing that people are definitely going to be talking about that's going to divide this movie is the ending. I hated the ending. I'm still reeling from the ending. I stumbled out of the theater, not sure what to make of it. And that also is one of the things that's driving me maybe wanting to give this a Rotten Tomato. I never saw that ending coming. And there's an end credit scene, and we all waited around because we were like, maybe this will fix it. But it just instead doubled down on it. And it was just a horrible, horrible ending. It's the kind of ending where you're like, get me a Lionsgate executive on the phone. But it doesn't matter because they already made the movie, it's done. But whew! I can't believe not a single person raised their hand and said, I don't think that you should do this. What's also weird is that for the first half of the movie, or maybe just the first third, but it felt like the first half, John Wick doesn't seem like the lead character, even though, again, this is a movie called John Wick. Instead, we spend more time with Donnie Yen. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Donnie Yen. I am the biggest Donnie Yen fan. I love that guy. He's so great, and this is the best role he's ever had in a Hollywood movie. I was so happy for him. But one problem was that it seemed a bit repetitive that he was playing another blind fighter after Star Wars. Like, they did some cool stuff with that. I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. But not enough to make it worth the distraction of, like, didn't you already play a blind fighter in Star Wars? So I'm sitting there going, why does Donnie Yen want to keep playing blind guys? I mean, and also, even if the character was written that way, if they wanted to use Donnie Yen, why didn't Donnie Yen say, I'd love to be in your movie, but I already played a blind fighter? Also, at this point, besides the fact that they went after his dog, which of course none of us will ever forget, and there's a fun callback to that of sorts here, which I thought was really well done, I've totally forgotten what the problem is between John Wick and the table. Like, I really would have appreciated some exposition to catch us back up, like previously on John Wick, or just someone saying, hey John, it's been a crazy road, hasn't it? But I was like, I don't even remember what you guys are fighting about. And that's interesting, because I think that also kind of takes away some of the urgency. You're like, why are we even fighting still? It also didn't help that the movie starts very suddenly, so much so that you feel like you've missed some key sequences to open up the film and set the stage. In fact, for the first, I'd say maybe 10 to 15 minutes of the movie, I thought there had been a mistake and they would have to restart the film because it had skipped ahead. But no, that's just the opening of the movie. That was also very bizarre. So it's like you're sitting there and you're like, oh my gosh, we've started? How far along are we? Wait a minute, let me get my bearings. So that was jarring as well. It took a long time for me to recover from that feeling. After a while, John Wick starts to get simpler tasks that are easy to follow within this film. So it becomes almost like video game missions. And with the fight choreography and some of the cinematography choices, it feels often like you're watching gameplay, especially an extended sequence in Paris, which is, again, one of the coolest cinematic action sequences I have ever seen. I can't wait for you to see that. Oh, it's so good. So that's why after my screening, I tweeted there should be a John Wick video game. Not whatever the heck this is, which some of you responded with. That's ridiculous. I'm talking about something that belongs in the Museum of Modern Art. I mean, that doesn't have any of the qualities of if you think that game is good, I don't think you understand what's so special and unique about the John Wick franchise. And if that game does it for you, maybe you'll be fine with this movie. You know, maybe it checks the boxes that you need and all you're looking is to check some boxes. All the previous John Wicks were written by Derek Kolstad, and to be fair, his co-writer on the third entry is a writer here. But it's a real shame Derek Kolstad didn't contribute to this film, because we've given all the credit so far for this franchise to director Chad Stahelski and Keanu Reeves, when clearly Derek Kolstad is a vital part of the John Wick formula because it falls apart when he's no longer there. The movie is really 3 sections. It starts out in Osaka, then it goes to Berlin, and then it finishes in Paris. And they definitely go from weakest to strongest sequences. So with not very much story, and what story there is hard to follow, and with no clear lead character, again in a movie called John Wick, what's left is the action and the actors. So let's start with the action. One of the most striking things about this film is that I've never seen a male fighter do the gymnastic-type takedowns the Black Widow and the MCU have made famous. But here, Keanu Reeves is wrapping his body around everyone and taking them down. He's also using his legs to keep fighters away from him. You know, like he's on the floor and he has his legs up to keep a fighter back. And it's a really different and interesting way to see a guy fight compared to what we're used to seeing, particularly, I guess, in Hollywood Western films. So that was really interesting, but I think it didn't quite work. Now, on the one hand, it looks different with Reeves doing it because he's in a suit and dress shoes, and it just looks really uncomfortable and awkward for that kind of movement. I'm like, oh, you're probably slipping all over the floor, man. He's like, I should have worn a different outfit if this is how I was going to fight. And it's certainly an effective fighting technique, but it's not that exciting to watch, especially the 5th and 6th time that he does it. It kind of becomes like a tumbling floor routine. And also, when you see it in Marvel and the MCU, it's very exciting. There's a lot of momentum and energy. But here, you know, Keanu Reeves is like really tired of doing it. Like, he just seems exhausted physically and mentally. And so he's just like, yeah, this is like kind of low key. I'm just going to take the guy down this way. So you're like, all right. But it's not that fun to watch. Besides, you know, once you get over oh, cool, I've never seen a guy do that before. Then you start to be like, okay, well, can you go back to hitting stuff? I mean, there's no action sequence here as incredible as the extended opening from John Wick Chapter 3 with the knife store and then the library. That stuff was incredible. Maybe the Berlin Fight Club scene has some moments that come close, but nothing like that overall, and that's a shame. As for the cast, Keanu Reeves has, of course, made this one of his signature roles. He still looks amazing, and he executes the action sequences very well. It's wonderful to see an actor do their own stunts. It really makes a difference. But his heart just doesn't seem in it this time around. As I said, he feels tired, and not in a character-tired sort of way, but the Keanu Reeves is tired. And again, he's not on screen for what seems like long periods of time, which is disappointing. You're like, I came here to see Keanu Reeves. Where is he? Donnie Yen, I love Donnie Yen. Love him. Again, as I said, go watch the Ip Man movies. They're phenomenal. Where Yen, I've always said, he brings a lot of the same qualities to that role as Bing Crosby did to his Oscar-winning role as Father O'Malley. And to make that comparison and to see how cultures can be very similar in some ways is also fascinating. So I love those movies. Go watch the Father O'Malley movies as well. Yen is, of course, a master martial artist, and so his sequences are extremely well done, except for the Star Wars distraction. But it was nice to see the franchise give John Wick a true equal. Another fighter in the game, right, is Shamier Anderson's The Tracker, who doesn't get to dress all fancy, unfortunately, but he does seem to have one of Halle Berry's dogs. I wish they'd clarified if that was one of her dogs. I'm like, hey, do you know Halle Berry's character? You seem to have one of her dogs. But his character clearly really grew on me as the movie progressed. I was like, this guy's awesome. And I came to like him as much as Reeves and Yen. I was like, I like the Tracker a lot. Billy Skarsgard isn't as interesting as I'd have hoped. He seems to have a silly French accent where he doesn't pronounce his R's, he pronounces them as W's. But the performance is just too muted. If you're going to chew scenery, chew the scenery. But speaking of scenery, his character is always in the most amazing settings, so that helps. And this is the first time I've ever enjoyed Scott Adkins as an actor. Every time we're thinking of casting a comic book movie, some of you will be like, what about Scott Adkins? And I'm always like, that guy can't act. And I don't think he still can act, but here his character is so over the top. I mean, talk about not being afraid to chew scenery, it works. I mean, he's clearly wearing a fat suit, but that just makes his character all the more absurd. And in some ways, John Wick Chapter 4 starts to become a bit like a James Bond movie, and even has a credit sequence at the end, very much like the famous James Bond credit sequences. The Scott Adkins villain was very James Bond. Ian McShane, Lance Reddick, and Lawrence Fishburne are all fine. It's always nice to see them. They're staples of the franchise, but they don't have much to do this time around. Clancy Brown joins the fun as a high-table referee of sorts, but he felt like a downgrade for the movie. He made it seem less cinematic, which is not a great sign for the Penguin series that he just signed on for. Hiroki Sanada and Rina Sawayama are fine. Sawayama does have a fantastic catsuit. I was like, you look fabulous. But again, the Osaka sequences are the weakest, from the action to the disjointed story, so they didn't fare as well as the other characters. So I'm very sad to say that John Wick Chapter 3 remains the strongest of the franchise. And wow, I cannot wait to discuss this ending with you. I can't wait to hear what you think of it. But for John Wick fans, Chapter 4 is still worth seeing because of, again, the amazing Paris action sequences. They are really they belong in a museum. They're incredible. And that is a good hour of the film. But you have to sit through 2 other hours. But the other 2 hours are fine. They're fine. But I expect more from this franchise, especially after Chapter 3. So that's my non-spoiler review for John Wick Chapter 4, hitting theaters March 24th. They they lifted the review embargo so early because it's playing at South by Southwest. So that means a lot of audience, non-press are seeing it too. So watch out for those spoilers. All right, share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.